So this is a joke about a second grade art class, and the teacher's walking around the room, and the students are all drawing, and she asks this one student, "So what are you drawing?" And it's sort of this wild, abstract looking thing, and the student looks up at the teacher and says, "Well, I'm drawing a picture of God." And teacher says to the student, "Well, no one knows what God looks like." And the student looks back at the teacher and says, "Well, they will in a minute." So what I like about that particularly is that as Unitarian Universalists, there are many paths to how we find spirit and many paths to how we find our own center. And, and I think one of the things that keeps us together as a Unitarian community and even our mindful reflection community is that we're all looking for some, or most of us, I would say, maybe all of us are looking for some deeper resonance, some connection to something that keeps us grounded, a sense of belonging, a feeling that we can rest in who we are. And the beauty is that there are so many different paths and ways of working toward this sense or this feeling. And there's a little how I got onto this path is that Terry Kinsey, my husband, most of you know, he started his Buddhist journey over 20 years ago. Started going on retreats, and he learned a lot about the basics of Buddhism and secular Buddhism specifically, and mindfulness meditation. And then maybe 10 years into that, I started joining him on that and learning a lot about it myself. And we've been now had the Mindful Reflection community for the past 7 years. And through all the talks and all the readings and everything that I've been able to do as part of this, I would say that it has honestly changed who I am completely. I mean, not completely, but how my mind operates and how I'm in the world with my emotions and how I deal with the hardships of my life. I'd say that it's been a sort of a major, major shift. And I wanted to share some of the central teachings tonight by talking specifically about the teachings of Tara Brach. Tara is my favorite teacher, and she wrote a book a couple years ago called Radical Compassion. And this talk tonight is mostly around the framework she has in Radical Compassion, along with a lot of my own thoughts about it. And just so you know, there's going to be a lot sort of packed into this because she's presenting a model of how we can do a practice. And we are going to go ahead and start a practice group on Sunday, January 9th in the evenings. And it'll be running mostly every other Sunday. It'll be 2 in a row, and then every other Sunday through through that we're going to work through the teachings of the book Radical Compassion to actually practice to see if we can embody and put some of this into practice for ourselves to see if that could be helpful. So to start though, I wanted to talk about sort of where Buddhism comes from in my mind is that that left to our own devices, we have a lot of thoughts and a lot of feelings and a lot of reactions, and it's easy to get flung from thing to thing to thing in our minds. And Buddhism provides a framework of how we can work with that in a different way. There's many ways of doing this. And as mindfulness came to the United States or to the whole Western world, there are a lot of strategies and techniques were given to how we can see how our mind is operating. And the techniques that were offered there's many of them. Sometimes it's just breath work or body scan. And there's wisdom teachings about impermanence and how things come up and down and learning how to accept things as they are. There's a lot in the mindfulness teachings, and that's why it's gotten so big and popular in the Western world. What Tara Brach has done is she has added another element to this I think what she has come to in her life and all of her teaching for 40 years is that for mindfulness, for many of us to really stick, we really need to deeply add the idea of compassion. And in fact, the title of my talk tonight is called The Two Wings. And this is not a Tara thing, this is a Buddhism thing called the Two Wings of Awareness. And the two wings of awareness are mindfulness and compassion. And that we need both of them if we want to be free. And if we ever find ourselves sort of in the grip of fear or doubt or resentment, or we're just somehow stuck in some way and the mindfulness techniques alone are not getting us out of that, adding compassion can be enormously beneficial. And those are the two wings. And the radical compassion, I'll talk about what radical means later, but that's the idea of it in general, is that we're doing mindfulness and compassion. So Tara created a model, and the model, she actually borrowed someone else's model and modified it. And the model is called RAIN, RAIN. And that's an acronym, and it stands for recognize, allow, investigate, nurture. And I'll be going through those individually, so don't worry if you didn't catch that. Recognize, allow, investigate, nurture. And we're going to go through each one and talk about how they sort of impact each other and how it can help us reach a greater sense of ease and a greater sense of well-being. So I'm going to start with recognize. Recognize starts with the idea of pausing. I mean, really, all mindfulness starts with the idea of pausing. And pausing might sound easy, but really, when we're caught in the thicket of thoughts and emotions, and especially if we're triggered or activated, pausing can be hard. I mean, that's a skill to learn how to pause in the middle of whatever we are reacting to. And so, but pausing is the beginning of it. Pausing is not the recognition practice. Pausing is creating an opportunity to be in the recognition practice. But if we can clear that thicket of thoughts, and we can make some opening, and we can allow ourselves to be here just for that one moment, then we can try to recognize. And the recognition practice, the R of RAIN, is recognize. And the recognition practice is to ask ourselves some simple question like, where am I now? What is happening? And it is often, there's many ways of getting there where we are now. A very common one that really, I don't think Tara has this in her book as much as other people have used this. It's called a naming practice. And the naming is, it's something where maybe we can boil it down to one word or one quick phrase. Like if we are feeling content, like that could be the reckoning. What's happening now? I'm content, or I'm sad, or I'm lonely, or I'm angry, or I'm energized, or I'm hopeful, or I'm blah, or I'm neutral. I mean, whatever it, or I don't know what I am. I'm just here. It doesn't matter. We're just recognizing that we're in the moment, that something has happened, especially if we're triggered or activated. If we can just this practice enough in and of itself, I mean, it can be enough in that if we can just pull ourselves out of the anxiety or out of the whatever the feeling is and just look down at ourselves and say, irritated. That's me being irritated. I see myself being irritated. And sometimes just pulling away and getting 3 feet above that and seeing ourselves being irritated sort of takes away some of the punch of it. It takes away some of the intensity of it because we've risen above it and we can see ourselves doing it. And so recognition, by the way, all of these, RAIN, are practices. Sometimes recognize is all we need. If we can do the R and recognize, pause, see what's happening, name it, and sometimes that's all we need and it dissolves. I mean, it's just that's all we needed to do is pull away for 10 seconds. Sometimes that's not enough, but sometimes it is. Tara Brach calls this, by the way, this whole practice, she calls it taking the U-turn. I like that image because the idea of it is that left to our own devices, we are off on roads. Our roads are our stories and the ways we frame it for ourselves and the ways we can repetitively tell ourselves something and the way we can, just get caught in it. And if we are caught in that, then taking the U-turn is where we come, instead of going down that road, we take the U-turn and we come back home. We come back to some sense of center, some sense of I'm just here, I'm more open, I'm more available, I'm here. And that U-turn can be very powerful because we're giving ourselves a chance to come home. And like I just said, that might be enough in and of itself. I'm going to move on though, because for me, R can be helpful. It is not always enough. And so then we move along to the A. And the A is stands for allow. The A of RAIN is allow. And so allow it to me is the heart of Buddhism. Allow is everything. It is the equanimity practice. It is knowing that the reality is, this is the main teaching to me of the Four Noble Truths, and of what that I've held on to the most of all that I've learned, is that we are, by our very nature, will push away anything unpleasant, push away any discomfort, and try to pull in everything pleasant and comfortable. It is in our DNA to do that. I mean, the only reason that humans made it through the survival of the species was because we do that. If we weren't trying to go for comfort and go for pleasant, we would never have made it as a species. We figured out how to survive. And so that's the good thing. But 2,600 years ago, what the Buddha figured, what Siddhartha, the man who became Buddha, figured out was that all that craving and longing and pushing away and aversion and all of that push and pull that's going on in ourselves is causing a lot more discomfort than the actual difficulty that's here. And life has difficulty, and we add to it tremendously by all the wanting and craving and pushing and aversion and all that. And so if we can allow, that's the A of rain, if we can allow all of it to be here, the comfort, the discomfort, the pleasant, the unpleasant, all of it is part of life. And if we can make room and make space and allow all of that to be in our field of awareness without pushing it away, then we can find a sense of ease. We can find equanimity. I always like to say when I talk about equanimity that it does not mean that we aren't trying to fix our lives. I personally have had a lot of physical discomfort. I've had a lot of health issues. I've had, job stuff, relationship stuff. I have things that are uncomfortable, and of course I'm trying to fix them. I'm in the world constantly trying to make my situation better and fix what's going on for me. I mean, that's fixing is part of life. What the allow practice is while I'm in the midst of fixing, and while I'm doing what I have to do to live my life, I am internally, in my mental state, in my emotional state, allowing discomfort to be here. I'm allowing unpleasantness to be part of the experience of being human. And Pema Chodron says the real healing comes from letting it all be here, making space for all of it. And the grief, the relief, the joy, all of it. And the more we can do that, the more space we can open for life to be life, the more we're going to find a sense of ease. And that is the central teaching to me of the Four Noble Truths. So allow to me is everything. But to move on with the model, I think that the I and the N, what happens with allow for most of us, and I would say for me, is sometimes even if I can get to allow, it's hard for that to stick. It's hard for that to sustain because there is discomfort, or there is my mind churning, or I am busy overthinking and replaying and regretting and all that stuff that I do in my mind because I'm human and I do these things and I worry and it's part of my who I am, is that it's hard for that to really stick. And there are many strategies to help it stick. And one of the biggest ones, where this book goes, this Radical Compassion book goes, is to use compassion as a major component of it. And so the N of rain, where we're going, is to nurture, which is the N of rain. So to me, and the Tara Brach doesn't say it this way, but the nurture, the I and the N are really feeding the A. It's all about allowing. The more we allow, the more we let it be here, the more we can find equanimity, the more peace we're going to have in our lives. And the I and the N can really help feed and support that as a practice. So let's just go with what the I is and what the N is. So the I is called investigate. Investigate is an interesting word, especially for those of us who've been in therapy and years of therapy. I've done a lot of investigating. I know many of my layers, many of where my childhood traumas were. I know a lot about how I operate. And there's a lot of investigation I've done over the years. But the I of rain is not necessarily that. That's a lot of work, and that's a long process. The eye of rain is something really much more immediate and much more something we can get to in a couple of minutes. And the eye of rain is really, to me, I don't know if she says it this way, but the way I think of it is the eye of rain is asking what needs to be nurtured, what is hurting, what is it, you're asking yourself some basic question of what am I believing right now? What needs my attention? What is hurting? What needs nurtured? And when we ask ourselves that, we have a chance to then give ourselves some sense of comfort and something that will help us feel more ease emotionally. And some people use their bodies. Where am I feeling it in my body? Because that tells them what they need to know. Some people use their emotional. What am I feeling emotionally? Or just what needs comfort. I'll say that I can't always get there. A lot of people can't get there. And so because we don't know what we need, we just know we're just ginning up, or we're thinking a lot, or we're just riled up for whatever reason, then the eye could just be as simple as the answer to the question, what needs nurtured, is just, I need comfort, or I need love, or I just need some warmth. It doesn't have to be a great understanding of anything. We can default back to, I need comfort, I need ease, I need love, I need something kind, I need kindness. So whatever, or it could be much deeper if we've done some more work and investigation deeper, and we know specifically what affirmation, or for me, it's often, I need to know that I'm enough. I need to know that life is enough. I have very specific things that I need affirmed. And if we know those things, then we can give ourselves those things. That's very specific. That's very helpful. And if we don't know the specific, then we go to the generic and just give ourselves warmth and comfort. So what this does, by asking this question, is it allows us to add the heartfulness practice to the mindfulness practice. The N of rain is the heartfulness practice of nurture. And we can shine, I think the mindfulness shines the light of awareness on our minds, and what our minds are doing, and what our stories are doing, and how our minds are operating. The N of rain gives us, with the compassion part of this, gives ourselves to shine a light of awareness on our hearts and what our emotional center is doing, and what needs nurtured in our emotional center. The reason that she calls this radical compassion is, I guess it's a couple reasons. It's sometimes just these words I'm about to say could be radical for some people. And the words were something like, we need to love ourselves into healing. We need to really bring goodness to ourselves into a place where we heal. And for some people, that's really hard to love ourselves. We did not get that messaging growing up, that we deserve that, or that's something one would give to themselves, to give themselves that much love and that much comfort, and to not measure up against anything and just get love because we're human and worthy of love. And that's not a message most of us got growing up, and many of us are not getting it from our current world, if depending what our world looks like right now. So giving that to ourselves can be radical. So that's one way it could be radical. Another way it could be radical is that I think for many teachers, sort of compassion is sort of an outcome of a mindfulness practice as we become more compassionate, and it's sort of a state that gets created, and it's wonderful because mindfulness creates compassion. And I think what Tara would say is, compassion feeds the mindfulness. Compassion is an inherent, strong self-compassion, especially, is a strong and important strategy to become more mindful. And if we want to reach a sense of acceptance and a sense of equanimity, it is really important that we add compassion to the mix, and again, self-compassion to the mix. And when we put that in there, we are more likely to be able to live with more ease because we loved ourselves into healing. And that's a central teaching of this book. And there are a lot of strategies to doing that. one of my favorite ways of framing it is from one of my other favorite teachers is Oren J. Sofer. And Oren, when he talks about self-compassion, he says that, it's sort of our inherent nature just is to move away from difficulty. Like if something's hard, and I know this is true for me, I bet it's true for a lot of people, our inherent nature would be to distract ourselves from it, to move away from it, to sometimes get into things that we're not so happy that we're doing, or behaviors or thoughts or stories or processes that are not so helpful. And the moving and the compassion, the self-compassion practice is to move toward the difficulty, to approach it, and to approach it with a sense of gentleness and a sense of tenderness and a sense of love. Whatever amount of kindness we can give to ourselves. And it could be as simple as putting our hands on our hearts and reminding ourselves that this is really hard, or I'm really here for you, or I'm really holding you, or you're enough, it's okay, I have you. It's just something that there's I heard this in some other talk many years ago of that old adage, you got to love yourself before you can love somebody else. Well, this particular teacher said that, think of it the other way. For those of you who are better at loving other people than you are at loving yourself, try it that way. And so I thought about that a lot, and just because I find it relatively easy for me to be kind to other people and to see their humanity and to forgive them their humanity, and just be understanding and kind and gentle with people. I find that not to be as hard as it sometimes is to do that for me. And so one of the ways I can approach the difficulty is approach it the same way I would approach someone I love if they were in difficulty. And what would I do for them? And of course I would bring them gentleness and kindness and grace. And so I try to move toward myself with that same idea. That's the N of RAIN. That's the nurture practice. And when we do that, we give ourselves a much greater chance of seeing our own goodness, of seeing the gold that's inside of us. We all have good, we all have gold, that's all part of us. And when we're bathed in that, when we're held in that, whatever was making it hard to allow whatever's here to be here dissolves a little bit, because we are in a different state of emotion. And we are just, there's just something that releases in our body. And I think there's actually probably biology to this, even that how our endorphins, or how our bodies, or how our muscles, something is releasing. Because I feel a relief when I give myself that. And that allows me, when I feel that relief, then it allows my mind to let go. The grip is less tight, and in fact, or the grip dissolves completely. So we are giving this to ourselves with a loving heart. And we are using our awakened heart to make this all possible. It's not just our awakened mind, but it's also our awakened heart. And so the bookmarks I made this year, then, what they have on them is it's all the words of the RAIN practice. You're going to see the words mindfulness, compassion, and then RAINN, recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture. All of those words are on there. And what I like about the idea of that is each one of those is a practice. Any of those words you see, allow is a practice, recognize is a practice, compassion is a practice. Any word you see, when you're putting that in your book or taking it out of your book, just to have a mindful moment and take 30 seconds and do any piece of that. And if something's stuck, maybe go through the whole model. Go through RAINN. You might be able to do that in 2 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and just go through that. The last step of this then, if we go through the R, the A, the I, and the N, or any piece of that, is to then do what Tara calls after the RAIN. And after the RAIN is the idea that if we really want something to stick, and we really want it to sustain, or we want to be able to get back to it more easily in the future, we need to hold it. We can't just do it for, have a momentary fleeting feeling and let it go. and go back to back to the other kinds of thinking we were doing. So the after the rain is to just for 30 seconds or 10 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever we can do to see if we can really rest in our awakened heart and our awakened mind, and see if we can build that in our minds and in our bodies, a way of knowing that feeling of rest, knowing that feeling of ease. And if we know it and if we practice it and we can drop in and do that multiple times a day in any way and rest in it for as long as we're able in that moment, that will then open up, make it easier to get to the next time. It just sort of changes the way that we're wired. It changes the way that we operate. And I'll just say that has been very, very powerful for me. And I get back to self-compassion so much faster now because I do it so frequently. And I get back to mindful presence and mindful heart in a way that has been very different than from before I started all of this. So my wish for you as you move into 2022 is that you find ways of doing that too. I wanted to close with a poem. This is actually from one of my favorite authors. His name is Scott Stabile, and it's a perfect compassion practice that really helped me a lot. And I thought I'd share it. These are Scott's words. Celebrate yourself because you and only you know the effort, courage, and resilience it's taken to this point in your life. Celebrate yourself because only you are aware of all the obstacles you've had to overcome and the inner strength you've needed to do it. And only you know what you're going through right now and how hard you're working to stay positive and loving and to keep moving. So yes, celebrate yourself today, tomorrow too, and every day after that. So on this New Year's Eve, may you celebrate yourself for all that you do and for all that you are. And may you live in 2022 with an awakened mind and an awakened heart. Blessed be. Namaste.